Welcome to part 2 of the 2022 Junior Model UN Preparatory Conference. In this part of the program, we're going to speak a little bit about what are resolutions, the key piece of documentation that the United Nations uses to present solutions to important global issues. Part 1 of these recordings addressed parliamentary procedure and the basics of the Sustainable Development Goals in the United Nations. Part 2 will cover an introduction to resolutions, with part 3 an opportunity for student delegates to write and amend resolutions themselves. So let's go ahead and jump right in. How does the United Nations present solutions to important global issues? Well, it's not a law, and I've already given it to you. It is a resolution. Resolutions are a written statement expressing an opinion or recommending specific solutions or actions to be taken on an important issue. Fundamentally, they are presented by one country or a group of countries that share the same ideas. So it's very important that as we think and learn about resolutions, that this is an expression of an opinion recommending specific solutions or actions to be taken on an important global issue. Some countries may approach certain issues very differently from each other. And it's very important that countries work together and come to a compromise in order to find a set of solutions that all countries can agree on. So an issue like climate change, each country may have very different relationships to the issue of climate change and may have very different solutions that they want to pursue. So it's very important that the United Nations and us as student delegates work to find compromise in our resolutions. Okay, let's take a look at what a sample resolution actually looks like. So here on the screen, we have a sample resolution written by the World Affairs Council on the topic of mandatory recess. We felt like this is an important issue and a good opportunity for us to learn a little bit about the topic of mandatory recess in the format of a sample resolution, of a really well-written sample resolution. There are 3 sections to a resolution: the heading, the preambulatory clauses, and the operative clauses. Each of these sections is equally important to each other, and so all 3 of them need to be contained in a resolution to make it a complete resolution. We'll go through each one of these in a second individually, but again, a resolution has a little bit of a strange formatting if you're not familiar with it, but there's a heading, some preambulatory clauses, and some operative clauses. Let's start with the heading. So the heading is crucial to identifying who is writing the resolution, who the resolution is being written to, and the topic of the resolution. Every resolution has to have a heading because the United Nations often has to sift through hundreds or thousands of resolutions at a time, and it's very important for them to know who's writing the resolution, who the resolution is being written to, and the topic of that resolution. So to go into some specifics here, you'll see 3 lines in the heading: the committee, the topic, and the sponsor. The committee is who this is being written to, who the resolution is being written to. So in this case, we are writing to the school administration on the topic of mandatory recess for students. And the sponsor, that's who the resolution is from, is in this case, the student council. So the student council has written a resolution on the topic of mandatory recess for students, and it's being written to the school administration. And like every letter, you begin with a dear, whoever the letter is written to, and in this case, dear school administration. Moving on to the preambulatory clauses. Preambulatory clauses are the second part of a resolution and are critical to the success of the resolution. It discusses background information on the resolution and answers questions such as, why is this issue important? What has already been done, and why is this still a problem? And it needs to reference reliable sources. So ultimately, preambulatory clauses elevate what the issue at hand is, why it's important, what has already been done, and why is it still a problem. Preambulatory clauses may seem a little bit like unfinished thoughts. Well, that's because we're going to present solutions to the preambulatory clauses in the operative clauses, the next part of the resolution. But right now, all we're doing with a preambulatory clause is elevating the issue at hand so that we can present solutions in just a few seconds. Some examples of reliable sources are the UN Charter, other UN resolutions, Sustainable Development Goals, along with any reputable resources and news sources that might be out there. A quick note on formatting. Preambulatory clauses start with an italicized first few words at the start of each clause, and each preambulatory clause is followed by a comma. So let's look at the preambulatory clauses that were created for our mandatory recess sample resolution that we put together. You'll note that there are 3 preambulatory clauses here. The first, alarmed by recent trends to reduce or eliminate unstructured recess time due to a higher focus on standardized testing and achieving learning goals. So again, in this preambulatory clause, we are elevating the issue at hand, which are recent trends to reduce or eliminate unstructured recess time. So again, just highlighting what the issue is, we haven't quite offered our solutions to that issue yet. That again is coming in the operative clauses next, but right now we're just focusing on what's the issue. Let's define what the issue is so that we can then solve it in the next part. Preambulatory clause number 2, fully aware that structured learning is important and that students have to demonstrate understanding for continued success and development. Preambulatory clause number 3, emphasizing that students with at least 20 minutes of unstructured playtime per day increase their level of physical activity, improve their memory, attention, and concentration, while helping them reduce destructive behavior in the classroom and improve their social and emotional development. Again, underscoring this idea that having unstructured recess time is incredibly important for the physical, mental, and emotional health of students. So again, raising the issue here and providing evidence why having unstructured recess time is very important for students. Now, we haven't quite presented solutions. That's coming next. However, if you're like me and you have some difficulty starting off writing these preambulatory clauses, we've actually given you a number of preambulatory clauses vocabulary that you can use in order to write your preambulatory clauses. These are the italicized phrases that go at the beginning of your preambulatory clause. And I encourage you to think about which phrase you choose, the meaning that that phrase has compared to others. Deeply concerned is going to have a very different meaning than observing or reaffirming. So very important that you think about the words and the terminology that you use as you write your preambulatory clauses. Okay, let's move on to our operative clauses. It is very important to remember that operative clauses and preambulatory clauses are linked together. Preambulatory clauses, like we just discussed, raise the issue at hand, whereas operative clauses suggest an action that should be taken to address the issue at hand. What should we do to actually solve the problem that we've just stated? It proposes reasonable solutions that the committee and/or UN member countries can enforce, and each operative clause should directly correspond to a preambulatory clause in the same order. Very important, and we'll talk about that direct correlation between preambulatory and operative clauses. But ultimately, the thing to remember with operative clauses is that they present solutions to the issues that we have just raised in our preambulatory clauses. A few words about formatting. The first few words of an operative clause are underlined, and each operative clause is numbered at the beginning and ends with a semicolon. Only the last operative clause ends with a period. Okay, let's look at the operative clauses that we presented in our sample resolution. Operative clause number 1 urges states to enact a mandatory recess time of at least 20 minutes per day for students aged 5 to 15. Number 2 draws attention to the harm of keeping students at a desk, learning for 7 to 8 hours a day with only a single lunch break throughout the day. And number 3 reaffirms the many positive outcomes recess has for students, such as increased attendance and productivity in the classroom. Each of these is presenting solutions or reasons why our solution is very important for us to solve this critical issue of students losing their mandatory recess time. Operative clause number 1 most clearly defines what our solution is. It is in asking states, in this case, states in the United States, to enact mandatory recess time of at least 20 minutes per day. That is the solution that we are presenting to this issue. Operative clauses number 2 and 3 further define the benefits of that solution and talk a little bit more about other possible solutions to the issue at hand. So once again, preambulatory clauses raise the issue, with operative clauses being where we can introduce our solutions to those issues. It's very important to note that operative clauses, this is your opportunity to get creative and think about reasonable solutions that we can use to help solve the issue at hand. Just like with our preambulatory clauses, we present you with a number of operative clause phrases that you can use to begin writing your operative clauses. Again, the terminology that you decide to use here is going to matter a lot for the overall effect that your operative clauses are going to have on the reader. Okay, let's take one last look at our sample resolution handout. The 3 parts, the heading, the preambulatory clauses, and the operative clauses. Each 3 parts are equally important, and if you're missing any of these 3 parts, then the resolution is not complete, unfortunately. So you need all 3 parts of those. Also note that our operative clauses respond directly to the preambulatory clauses. Preambulatory clause number 1 is directly linked to operative clause number 1, in that operative clause number 1 presents a solution to the issue in preambulatory clause number 1. Operative clause number 2 presents a solution to the issue raised in preambulatory clause number 2, and the 3rd operative clause correlates directly to the 3rd preambulatory clause. So there is clause correlation between our preambulatory and operative clauses. And finally, just a note about formatting. Do please note that the terms in the preambulatory clauses begin with italicized terms and end in commas each clause. The operative clauses are numbered, begin with underlined phrases, end with semicolons, with the final operative clause ending in a period. Again, 3 parts to a resolution, all 3 parts equally important: the heading, the preambulatory clauses, and the operative clauses. Okay, now we've learned a good amount about operative and preambulatory clauses and how to write a resolution. You should check out part 3 of these recordings of the 2022 Junior Model UN Preparatory Conference so that you can get some practice writing your own resolutions. Part 3 will have an opportunity for you to write and amend resolutions, and is a great opportunity for practice your skills with presenting. Okay, good luck on part 3.